Alrighty then, let's party. It's time to do the dance. Hello, welcome everyone to Disabled Girls Who Lift, another episode we've got for you. This is Marcia, she, they, sitting on Seminole Tribe land in Florida. I'm wearing a plain gray t-shirt, my beautiful brown black skin, some headphones. I'm in front of a colorful wall, and my throat is dry from some flaky empanadas, but I'm still gonna talk. So we're out here. Marybeth, you're up.
Like those Popeyes biscuits that we encourage you not to eat right before an episode.
Yeah.
Like you're coughing in between each bite.
Still gonna eat it though.
Right in front of the famous wall too that everybody loves for YouTube.
I know.
My name's Marybeth, y'all, sitting in Northern California on Ohlone land, she, her, wearing a teal sweatshirt, doggy in the background, sitting in my living room. You don't see it now, but I've got 90 candles in a backyard that we handmade for our wedding. That's why I keep trying to hide it with the microphone. So it smells really good in here. Super excited to welcome Princesa Cata, aka Kat Lopez, in Tucson, Arizona. They're sitting on Tohono, O'odham, and Pascua Yaqui land. Please, I hope I got that right. But they're a queer polyamorous Xicanx femme who is a chronically ill survivor. Also has a dog herself, Wheezy, who we met briefly. And I love a lot about what you said in your bio, just saying that collaboration is key to the success of any relationship and, you know, shared space, community, organization, the works, because I think we live by a lot of that at Disabled Girls. I live by a lot of that as a poly queer femme myself, and just the way that you incorporate that into everything else and everything that you love to talk about, which is death, grief, conflict, abuse, abolition. Just I'm excited to kind of talk more with you. So welcome, Kat.
Thank you.
Welcome, Kat, to the podcast. So if you would let everyone know what are we doing? Your name, your pronouns, and your
just a quick visual description.
That's right. Woo! Got it. I'm back. Woo!
There.
Yep.
Kat, pronouns they, she, and I am a curly-haired, medium tan skin person with some beautiful gold hoop earrings, nice mustard yellow dress, and some beautiful red extensions on my nails.
I was going to say, don't forget about the nails.
I am currently in my bedroom because this is where all the magic happens, truly. And by magic, I mean rest.
Yes. I don't want a girl boss. I want a girl rest.
Exactly. I also have sparkly stuff on my eyes, so that's fun. Is
Lovely.
That a good description?
Oh yeah,
I think it gets the vibe
Perfect.
down. I think so. Yeah. So I mean, there's so many things to talk about, right? But I would love to know what this doula and grief support and death support, what, who are they? Why? Where'd that come from? What are you doing?
And it's great because we only know so many kinds of doulas. I only know like postpartum doulas.
Yeah, most people only know birthing doulas.
Yeah. I mean, that's where it all started for me. I've been a doula for about what is time? It's been like maybe 5 years at this point. And it started out as a birth and postpartum doula, also doing some abortion support in that. And it was around 2020, I guess, is when shit just hit the fan, truly. Yeah. For all of us, but for me in particular, the very beginnings of COVID-19, like the pandemic and like all the shutdowns and stuff, I lost my co-parent to cancer. Oh. And it was literally like the same week where I was told like in the city that we had to like shut down. And so I was navigating that, trying as a chronically ill person, I was like, okay, how am I going to celebrate the life of this person who raised me, who loved me, who's a piece of me, while also considering like all my other family members. I had a cousin who was doing chemo, and we had really long conversations about like how do we honor our grief but also respect our bodies, as people who are immune compromised. And so we decided not to have a funeral, and it was really, really rough. I think that was kind of like the beginning of a lot of other really intense things unfolding. And I was just navigating COVID and the grief, and I wasn't really navigating the grief. I was avoiding it because it was too hard to like recognize that I couldn't actually like celebrate this human in the ways that felt culturally like appropriate to me and my family. And then later on that year in November, I had to put my 17-year-old dog down, who I've had since he was 3 months old. So this was like my buddy, my best friend. And it was something like I knew we all know it's going to come, right? And so because I had just lost my co-parent in March, and it was like November, and I was like, I don't want to do it, but I don't know what happened, but I basically was like, this is my opportunity to do over my grief. I now can decide how I'm going to navigate and tackle this in a way that feels good for me. And so I did like a whole ritual with my dog. It sounds very silly, but I took him out on his last walk. We went and got like a puppuccino. I wrote a eulogy essentially in my journal, and I read it to him as I held him. I did so many things. Somebody came into our home and euthanized him, and in his bed he was asleep. He had his toy. Like it was such a beautiful. I didn't even know you could do that. I know, isn't that amazing? In his
environment, like his favorite environment.
Mm-hmm. And I held him as it was happening, and he was surrounded by love and fresh air, and it was a very beautiful experience. And that was kind of like my awakening, I guess. And I realized like I want to create this for other people, whether that's for their pets, for their loved one, or for themselves. I want people to honor, to memorialize themselves before, the actual act of physical death.
Right.
And to help people figure out how to navigate a grief that is often, ridiculed. It's often pushed aside. Like I was just, I felt like I had experienced something completely different, and I wanted to share that. And so then I got into the whole death doula grief support work.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's what I was looking for. And then I just found like a weird therapist, and she just wanted to like hug me, and I was like, I don't want you to push me. So I think that would have been great. I could have used a doula if I knew that existed.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even think to Google that.
Yeah, I think most people don't. I think because we're in such a death and grief avoidant society, like we don't want to talk about it ever.
No.
And if we do talk about it, it's very temporary. Like we're like, let's just get it out of the way and then remove ourselves completely from it. I think that is what causes the lack of awareness and education and resources, because there's just like this sense of urgency to get over things that are really like life transforming, like really fundamental things that make you who you are. I believe personally, like in grief, and it's a universal thing, right? Like we experience grief not just through physical death, but like in internal deaths, like as we cycle through things. There's just so much that we have to process, and we're not really allowed, especially as folks of color, like we're not allowed to grieve. We have to keep going.
Or even getting a new disability, a new chronic illness.
Yeah.
That's a lot of grief and loss too.
Oh, 100%.
But everybody just wants you to be like moving on so you can have some, oh, they overcame blah 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 article.
Right, they're
like
strong. Yeah. Resilient. And I'm like, I'm in pain.
Yeah.
I'm tired. Like
Everyone always tries, yeah.
What are you gonna
Everyone
say?
always
Go for
tries
it.
to find like the happiness in grief. Like, but you're doing fine, right? You're like, right?
My
Get
favorite
it?
is you look fine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it looks like you're doing great. And I'm like, just because I'm cute doesn't mean I'm not in pain.
Yeah.
I can do both.
It's a Venn diagram. Okay. Did you like a flow chart? I'll help you out. Did you like an infographic? That's the dumbest shit of all time. But not the urgency of getting over things though, I relate to that hard. Because when I lost my mom, I literally would turn my phone off because everybody I've never spoken to my whole life was like always calling, texting. Nothing of it was helpful whatsoever. And then maybe month 2, crickets.
Yeah.
Nothing. So my first question to you would be, if you are that person rushing to talk to someone who lost someone, like what should you be doing like with yourself before you even go there? Because there were a lot of people that I was like, I need to tell you some things about the way you're approaching this. This is fucking weird.
First of all, don't.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I like to tell folks who are in the support role of the grieving person is, have you taken a moment to think about your relationship to death? And more often than not, they say no. And I say, well, okay, I invite you to take at least 30 minutes of your life to sit down and think about it and write it down and start to think, like, if I was in this position, what would I want? And more often than not, we want tangible things. We want consistency too, not just like past the first month or whatever. Like, we want people to just meet us where we are and not tell us how we should or shouldn't be feeling. So yeah, I think just like really taking time to sit with like, what feels good for you? What would you want? What don't you want to hear? Because there's a lot of you don't want to hear, right? Like for me personally, I'm like, I don't want to hear at least you had this, you know, or it's like, at least you had X amount of time with this person. It's like, that's not relevant to my pain right now.
That's terrible.
Yeah. Or, you know, they're in a better place. I'm like,
everything happens for a reason. Okay. Right. Well, I'm sad right now for a reason.
Exactly.
Hello.
Yeah, true. Like, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean? Like, I think more often than not, it's just people are projecting their discomfort onto others. Yeah. And they don't know how to name, I'm uncomfortable right now. You know, and I think I try to encourage people to just be direct and honest and be like, you can tell someone, I don't know how to support you, but I'm all ears. Like, I'm here to listen. I'm here to read how I can support you. Feel free to like write it in a letter, write it in an email, write it, you know, on a sticky note, like offering different ways to create communication with each other. And no urgency. I always say, please remove the urgency from the space. Like, what has happened is a really big deal. And so like, let's move at the pace that the person is wanting to move. Like, remove your urgency from it, remove your perceptions, your projections, your feelings from it. And remember that as a support person, you're just there to witness. You're there to hold, you're there to care. And you allow that person to tell you how to do that, you know, because that looks different for everybody in different situations.
Yeah, no, that's perfect advice. I think a lot of it is hardcore projection for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The biggest thing that people don't realize is that everyone has their own unique personal choice of how to grieve too. Mm-hmm. And even if they were to ask themselves some of those questions, they think that what they need is what that person needs. Mm-hmm. Right. They need more social support. They need more family and friends in their lives right now. Yeah. But if we are pushing you away, please read that message.
Yes, I definitely had a lot of overbearing, overkill. Like even my father-in-law would literally call me multiple times a day. I'm like, what do you want me to say to you? We first of all, we don't talk on the phone. So this is already weird. Why are you calling me? Like, what do you want? Just like, you're not bringing like you're not bringing me food. You're not like washing my dishes for me. You're like
Right.
doing anything.
Right.
And he would literally call my husband upset, like, oh, I don't know what her problem is. I'm trying to help her. I don't know what to do. So then maybe
Yeah.
then actually ask me that. I don't know. Why is that such a difficult thought process? But
Yeah,
it was that times 30 people. Because I have a big family.
Yeah. I mean, it's that sense of like entitlement in some ways where like I know what's best. And so I'm going to put it on this person. I mean, and more often than not, that's like in most crisis situations. Like we feel that we have to like come in and save the day. Where it's like
Marybeth has a story for that one.
No, there's no saviorism here, right? Like that saviorism is not support. That's not it, honey.
Facts. Yeah. Marybeth has a story. Oh God, that one makes me still cringe.
What, coming in and save the day?
Yeah, your little break and then the cousin or something.
Yeah. So I mean, along with death and grief comes like death and grief of a relationship, or even a temporary end to a relationship too. Is like when people think they know what's right for you, they form this women's emotional support group that you have to go to, and you have to meet all these strangers that you are not comfortable with, go to some foreign island and just sit in your feelings together. But that's not what I personally want. So sometimes family who think they know what's best for you will push that on you, and will get upset that you don't receive that well. And you got to give yourself that power to say no when you're not comfortable, and you got to give yourself the space. Like I had to break some ties for a year because of that, and then that's fine. So I love to hearing that you kind of had your personal do-over with your dog, and I'm sure you there were some restrictions, right? People couldn't gather also during that time. It wasn't just the choice to not hold the funeral. You also literally couldn't gather or see your family.
You can't. Most of those people were closed. There wasn't even that 10 people funeral yet. I think it was just closed, right?
No, it was completely closed. And we couldn't do anything. So it was like she was just buried. I mean, that was and none of us had an opportunity. And I mean, some of us have gone since restrictions have it, like, because even with flying, so we decided to take her back to Mexico and like bury her there. And so like we couldn't even go visit until like a year later.
Yeah, you're so disconnected.
But it did happen in Mexico.
Folks, majority of my family, I come from a big ass family, y'all. Like my my co-parent is also my grandmother, and she had 15 children. So there's a lot of kids. Most of them were in Mexico. So it was like, they could visit, but there's like 5 of us, like five of her children. And then all of us, like the grandkids and everybody, who have yet to go. Like I still haven't gone, and it's been 2 years. So yeah, it was a very interesting time to navigate, which I'm sure my story is not unique during that time. There was a lot of death and dying and grief happening, and still to this day, right? Like, let's acknowledge that. And how there still is this like push to not talk about it,
just tuck it under a rug, keep it moving. It's not even happening. Like, why? Or even just preparing for these things, right? Like you just want to pretend everything is fine, and not have a will. And even if we don't like the way the systems are, right, but they are the systems. And if you die and you leave somebody to take care of your shit, like it's not going to be a good look for them,
right?
But because you don't want to talk about it.
Nobody wants to talk about it. Where it's like, because it's not if we die, it's when we die. It's inevitable. Like we all will physically die. And it's like that, saying that sentence really makes people uncomfortable.
Right.
It's hard for people to be like, whoa, you're
Yeah.
right. Like this is, and that's why like that the conversations about it and the preparation and like, how do you want this to happen for you? What is your ideal situation? You know, how do you want people to show up for your loved ones after you pass? Like even those like questions are so crucial in my opinion, because like after my dog passed away in 2021, my mother-in-law unexpectedly passed away.
Oh wow.
In June or July. And then 3 months later, my cousin passed away. So I was like, it was continuous losing, like physically losing people that I had really like strong connections with my family, you know? But at that time, because of the do-over with like my dog and just like all of the things that I was learning through in community with other death doulas and death workers, I was able to approach it in a very different way, you know, and now it feels really good to be able to support those who also lost, you know, like my husband, supporting him through the loss of his mother, my sister-in-law, supporting my aunt and my cousin's widow and his 2 small children. Like it just made it like super easy for me to like show up and be like, let's talk about this. Like, I know everybody else is telling you, you're going to be fine. You have to be strong for your kids. Right. Where it's like, you're telling this parent who has a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old that she has to be strong for her kids, but she just lost her lifeline. She lost her income. She lost everything. So it's like, can we just honor that? Can we just take a moment to honor it? And I think that that's really hard because nobody wants to feel the discomfort of knowing that this is going to be really hard. There's going to be a lot of struggle ahead, you know?
It's so nuts though, because at the same time we can do hard things, and when the hard things are done, people love to write a story about it, but like nothing in between. Like, come back to me when you have a nice inspirational story. Not now though, you know.
I don't want to see
we only want to highlight the joys.
Yes. Yeah. We don't have room for the ugly stuff, right? The ugly stuff, the sadness, the anger, the complete loss of hope. Like, we don't want that. We want to see you know,
we want to see the comeback.
Right. Do your trauma stuff over here. And then when you're done and you've learned all those lessons, like, let's extract. Let's go ahead and extract from you. And you know, maybe we'll learn something, which is it's so messed up.
It's pretty gross. That's not how it works.
That's not how it works.
Sometimes it happens with others as well. Like, especially, I don't know, if you live in the same household or share the same small family. It's okay to grieve together in your own ways.
Yeah, communal grief. I love that. I'm always trying to like encourage people to grieve in community and to be open and you know, just do it. You feel something as you're in community, just cry. Just do it, you know?
Go for it.
And when people ask like, what's happening? Or are you okay? You know, let them know that you're not okay. Like, I think a lot of times that people pleasing comes in, and that like scared of judgment and shame comes in, you know, because we don't want people to really see that, because there's the other piece of like vulnerability and safety, right? Like, it's like, do I feel safe enough to be my full self in this moment? Because then there's all these other moving pieces that can happen if you do show up in despair, you know?
Right. That's true. I think that's a good lead into questions of boundaries also. How do you decide when because like, sure, you don't want to rush it. Sure, you want to honor the space that you're in, but what about situations where you do just have to like put on a mask and go, you know, you just have to go to work, or you just have to so
like, how do you show up for the kids too?
You still have to take them to school, you know? Like, one of my jobs, I quit one of my jobs because the boss told everyone my mom died. I didn't want to talk about it. I quit after that. I was like, I'm not talking about this with anybody.
Oof, what an invasion. Like, that's really not okay. In regards to boundaries and how do we show up in our grief, like, that's a really That's hard. That's a really good question. And I love that you asked me that, because I think it all comes back, for me, it all comes back to the preparation of care. It comes back to before we are in these moments of crisis, because that's what I believe happens more often than not when we're experiencing a physical loss, of a family member or a loved one. It is a crisis. And so talking to each other beforehand about like, how can I support you in a crisis? So if someone does have children, like if I'm in a crisis, I would really love it if you gave me tangible care through childcare, through bringing me, a hot meal twice a week, through all these things, because, and also naming the fact that like the leave that we get when we experience a loss is not enough, right? Here's 2 weeks off.
If you get
it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, now you have to pretend like nothing happened, or now you have to like deal with the fact that people are going to ask you a bunch of these questions, or be like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. And then that's it, and not really offer anything outside of that. That's why it's important to have your own conversations with your community and the people that you trust, and saying like, now I have to put on a show and this is going to be really hard. So maybe can I call you once a week and do a little debrief of what my experiences have been at work? Can you take the kids for the weekend so that I can like spend time with myself and like cry what has happened, like release all of the things that have happened this week? There's just so many different ways that we can show up for people in these situations, because it is, I always really like to say that grieving, we have to acknowledge that it's a privilege to grieve in the ways that feel good for us.
Right.
It's not tangible for many folks to grieve at the pace that we want, in the ways that we want. And honestly, it's very not tangible to have the kind of support that we want too. And so I think by just naming that it's already like a shit show.
Yeah.
And just starting there and being like, it's not great. So how do we make it better?
Right.
How do we create and reimagine how we show up for each other during these times?
I think that last part is also, it's making me think of a couple of our other podcast guests that had some catastrophic thing happen to them. Either they were disabled or not. Maybe they were already chronically ill, but there was like a big event, and then, now they're more sick, or now they were fine before, now they're paralyzed. And then they have to like, they leave the hospital and go back out into the world, or, return to their friend group, or try to go back to the gym. I think a lot of that applies to that also.
Yeah. Like y'all were mentioning, there's grief in everything. It's not just like a physical death. It's like the relationships shifting, the loss of the things that we thought we were going to be able to do, but no longer can do. Like there's just so much, there's so much grief all the time.
You're navigating life in a different way and adapting the same way that anyone else would, like back to work or leaving your job, or adapting a workout because you can't do it the same way anymore. How can I do it another way that still is healing? And so that's just very powerful to kind of acknowledge what makes you happy and thrive in that situation, even if it's different for your mother or your sister, right?
So what happens if somebody can't figure out what works for them? They just know what doesn't. They copy what everybody else does and can't figure it out. How do you figure it out? Get the doula.
I was like, have someone to help you.
Don't do the stuff that you hate.
Right. But it's so easy for us to say that, right? Like it's easy for us to be like, well, don't do it. But it's like, well, what are the other options? What does this person really have that is accessible to them? Like that's a whole thing, it's not as easy as saying like, then just don't do it, and that needs to be acknowledged. Like, I think that's, for me, it's really, really important to always bring that into every conversation when I'm collaborating with people and being like, because sometimes people really think things are easy. And I'm like, maybe for you, but we're not I or not somebody else. Like, have you taken the time to actually think if this is truly accessible to someone? Like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and so many of our podcast guests that have like communities of their own. So like Maria that has Rolettes, or Ashley, which would be our last episode, who has RA Warrior Fitness. Like, they don't name it as grief, right? They don't name it as that. But if you think about the things that they're saying, they're like, well, when this happened to me and I was sick, I felt alone and I didn't know what to do. But sounds like grief.
Yeah. Well, when you name something as grief, there's so much that's implied by that, you know. So it's very different.
It's nuts, because that's what calls people to those communities, because that's the feeling that they have. And although nobody's identifying what the feeling is, they're like, oh, I feel that way too. Let's get together. Now I feel better. This is amazing.
Yeah, grief is usually what happens in the absence of care, you know? So.
Okay.
Say that again. Put that on a shirt.
I think we need to put the transcripts and print them out and just scan it for things we could put on shirts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what initiates it. That's what creates the feelings of despair. It's like, true. We don't have care in our lives. It is not implemented, it is not practiced, it is not ingrained in us, and therefore we feel those feelings of despair, of loneliness, of like, you know, what now, what's the point? Like, those questions start to happen because we're not being cared for in the ways that we're so worthy of, right? Regardless of who you are, where you come from, all that stuff. Like, every person, every human, every living being is worthy of care. So I think that's why I love the whole, grief support bit, because that's my goal, is to be like, you're grieving right now. Now let me work with you to take care of you. Not let me come in here and swoop in and save the day. But like, do you trust me enough? Do you want to trust me? Do you want to build this vulnerability with me so that we can create care for you in the ways that feel good? And then eventually you can live with this grief and feel good about it,
and live with the grief, not get over it, not move on, not overcome it.
Live with it, and create a completely different, you're reframing it, right? Like, you're reframing the grief. Like, grief is something that we all experience,
right?
And I think that because we don't name it as that, we try to name it as something else. We're like, oh, I feel sad, I feel alone, I feel angry, where it's like, oh, you're grieving, and then people are like, no, I'm not. It's just like, but you are, and that's
you're wearing a mask, but you are.
That's all right.
There's nothing wrong, it's all good.
Just say it.
But it's cool too to recognize, both as an outsider and the person experiencing it, that it's going to take some work. Like, we're not saying that this is easy or that you're going to get over it after your 2-week bereavement. It's going to take like a lifetime of work and loving yourself and living the life, little bits of your life. To recognize that you deserve that care.
Yeah, the deserving piece, right? That's a big piece where, especially when we already feel like burdens in this world, when you are disabled, you're chronically ill, you are a marginalized person, like, you belong to many marginalized groups, like, you don't often feel like you're worthy of that care, the care that you want, the care that you need, right? Because we're told that we're just an inconvenience, it's too much, right? And I'm like, I am there in my vocabulary, there's no such thing as too much. You're just enough, you know what I mean? Like, give me all the things. I want that list of how to take care of you, and I gladly give that list to the folks in my life, where I'm like, this is exactly what I need, how I need it, like, and
here's my Venmo account. Sometimes people don't talk about the financial hardships of that too.
Right. There's no shame there. It's like, if you want to support me, Here it is. Cash App, PayPal,
we'll do
Zelle,
it then.
Venmo.
I take them all.
We'll do it then. Let's go.
Or I'll start a new account just so you can wire me some.
Truly, it's like,
Exactly.
which one do you want? Pick one,
Yeah.
anyone. But yeah, it's hard, it's hard to be like, I'm deserving of the care that I want, right? Because like saying, of course we're all deserving of the care that we need, but even then some people don't believe that. But to say that you want care a certain way is like,
Yeah. And
it's even more.
You might not be surrounded by people that are receptive to that. And you might not
Right.
necessarily have the space to choose depending on.
Sorry, you muted, Marcia. Start over.
Whoops, embarrassing. I don't know what I said. It's over now. But all I can tell you is that because of my grief, I also changed lots of my relationships. Definitely.
Ooh, let's talk about that in regards to boundaries, right? Like,
yes.
Whenever we're experiencing deep grief or in the grief feels, how the relationships change, huh? So many relationships end, they shift, and so many begin. And I think for me, when I was processing all of this for myself, is when I really started focusing on boundaries and being like, it's time to place these boundaries. It's time to even think about what it means to me, how I've historically have viewed boundaries before, and how I want to shift that. Because for me, boundaries, I'm a recovering people pleaser. So I was like, boundaries. What it get?
As long as
Like,
everyone else is happy, then there doesn't
yeah,
have
I'm
to
like,
be
what? But then I started to realize, like, because there were so many people not showing up for me in times that I needed it, in times where I wasn't even physically capable of saying that I needed it because I was so distraught, that I was like, it's time to think about what I'm deserving of. And then from there, I'm going to implement those boundaries of, I do not associate with people who cannot talk about these things. If you want to be in my inner circle, you have to be able to talk about crisis. You have to be able to offer some type of support in crisis. And that's a hard boundary. And that boundary is created so that I can take care of myself and so that you can learn how to take care of me. And, it's been really great. I will say that I've had the privilege, I would say, to place boundaries, because not everyone has that privilege, because many of us are in situations where we're like, if I place this boundary at work, I won't have a job.
Right.
So it's like, I'm very grateful to have had that and to still have it, really.
I'm with you on that. And there's so many people will be like, oh, we can't just cut people off like that, and you can't do this and you can't do that. But again, half the things that people are saying is projection. Like, why can't I? Like, why do I need to have this quote unquote friend and all we can talk about is brunch and nail polish? But like, if I want to talk about some shit that hits the fan, it's crickets. Like, why do I have to? Like, why? For what?
Yeah.
Cut it.
Snip. Yeah, no, that's, I mean, unless that friend's giving me, like, paying for my brunch and paying for my nails, then I don't really know.
Slide.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's happening? Like, what's the reciprocity here? So that's the thing. It's like, that's the number one thing. Like, if I start to feel like there isn't reciprocation, that's where my boundary flag is like, it's time, put the boundary down, see what happens. And more often than not, it really does show you, okay, this actually isn't worth my time and my energy, and it's time to shift. It's time to detach. But once again, because I have that opportunity to, right? Like, I have the care network and the support to detach.
So. All right. That's true. I think before we start another thread of convo, we'll take that little mini break. So if anyone has to physically go anywhere, you can physically go. Otherwise, We'll pop back into.
Mhm.
Anyway, so we're back. So we're back. Lots to talk about death, dying, grief, conflict. Can I say something about, I don't mind talking about death, but you know what does bother me? Random. It's nothing to do with anything. I just don't like headlines. And they say somebody's name and they're like, dead at 99. Like, I don't know why, but that bothers me so much. It's just, why do they phrase it like that? Like, nobody likes talking about death and dying, but they can write things like, it's like such a salacious headline. Like, damn, that's a person.
It's kind of like inspiration porn for disabled folks, right? What's going to get us the most clicks and views? Oh my God, Betty White died before turning 100. Oh my gosh, like all these
like they'll
things.
put dead at, like, I'm like you can't be like wonderful Betty White transitions or some whatever. No, dead at 99.
Yeah.
I think that's so hypocritical.
Well, in some ways it's dehumanizing, right?
Yeah,
like
that's what it is.
It doesn't create space to acknowledge the human behind the age, behind the experience, right? And I think that's why so many folks avoid talking about death, because it is a very we don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah.
We don't talk about Bruno.
Yeah.
I mean, that's conflict, right? But
yeah.
Okay, but conflict. So have y'all experienced this? I don't know if you've been in circles where the whites are talking about Encanto, and then you're in a circle where the blacks or the browns or whatever other Asian folks or other marginal communities are talking about it, and it's like two different conversations.
100%.
Did you experience that, Marybeth?
I've seen a lot of like white mothers who are like, "Oh, I listen to this all the time, but I wish it was in English." Bitch, everything else in Disney is in English.
Go watch a different movie then. Go away. Yeah, so that is a great level of conflict right there. I wish it could be all solved with one conversations and a couple of songs, but definitely none of these. Peak immigrant culture is pretend your conflicts and traumas did not exist.
Yeah. Conflict avoidant, accountability avoidant, like avoidant of it all. It's pretty great.
Like
that's why I love conflict. That's why I love it. I love it. I'll say it again.
Turns me on.
It really is kind of like a kink for me at this point. I'm just like, oh, you having trouble? Let's talk about it,
Yeah. Oh yeah, you mad? Oh yeah.
You're distraught and you kind of don't like me right now. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
I messed up. Hold me accountable.
Let's sit down on the couch and have some coffee.
Yeah, and cry. Good stuff. No, yeah, I absolutely adore conflict because it is the great gateway to understanding.
It's healthy for the most part, right? If no one's getting harmed or whatever. But
yes, of course.
It's a normal part of life.
Yeah.
Everything can't be beautiful all the time.
And that's why I think it's super cool too. Just like, I don't know, I think it's a good segue from talking about presenting boundaries in your relationships, friendships, family, into how you can utilize those tools to either build more quality in those relationships or friendships. Like a really big thing that I use in everything, not just intimate relationships, is love languages, right? And I feel like love languages can also be presented in grief, in celebration, whatever it is that you're experiencing in life, in knowing what that person needs from you, what that person needs from you at that moment or in life in general, like and what you're good at giving. And if you're not good at giving what they need, maybe you need to kind of shift, right? If that person is a strong friend or relationship in your life, like for instance, quality time. If quality time is not at the top of my list, but it is my best friends or my partners, we got to find some way to meet in the middle,
Yeah.
right? And that can come in times of grief or in times of bettering those relationships or communication.
But if you have that already in set when things are good, then when things are not always good, you already know what you already have a framework. Like that's the difference. You're not just going to be shouting at each other. You're going to be like, all right, here's what we're going to do. Yeah.
But sometimes people don't know that, like, if we don't prioritize our love languages in our friendships, we're not going to know what that person needs from us when a crisis arises. Right? Like we're just going to shower them with gifts, even though that's not on the top of their list. Like, why are you just giving me flowers and whatever, chocolate? Like, maybe that's good, but that's not what I need right now. I need you to be here and spend time with me because quality time is important.
Yeah. No, that's so true. I think I have a great example of that. It would be probably every time it's my husband's birthday, he always says, everybody, his family's like, I mean, I already talked about my father-in-law. What do you want to do for your birthday? What do you want to do for your birthday? What do you want to do? And this is peak COVID. We don't want to go anywhere, right? Peak COVID. So me and my brother literally were just like, all right, what do you want to get him? What's his favorite food? All right, let's get that. And then we just sat at home and just waited for him to tell us what he felt like doing. Because that's all he likes, is that somebody is available to him. That was it.
And that's hard sometimes as a people pleaser, right? As an extroverted introvert, is like, you want to give what you think they will enjoy.
Yeah, like, but I want to make them happy and I want to do like, no, just literally just sat on the couch, minded my damn business. Like, hey, got you some coffee. Hey,
well, it's that sense of urgency, you know, like when we, in all relationships, more often than not, the goal is intimacy. It's to build intimacy, is to create connection. And we've only learned how to create connection through that sense of urgency, through trying to read people's minds and think like, oh, they're going to like this, or, you know, this is how I show love and they'll receive it. And they are the only person who can meet my needs. And and that's why I'm polyamorous. You know, I would, but seriously, as a polyamorous person, like, getting comfortable with the idea that, like, I'm married as well. So my spouse is not going to meet every single need, even if he knows my love languages. He knows I love physical touch. He knows I love words of affirmations, but my God, is it hard to get him to tell him I look cute today, you know? Because I love to be worshipped. I love to be told multiple times a day how fabulous I am.
Okay, so well, hold on. I'm gonna pause you right there. Your curls popping. Okay, the nails gorgeous. All right, the little glitter, it's doing it for me. All right, continue.
Yeah, and I love to receive that. And he is just not. He doesn't feel comfortable doing that all the time, right? He does it occasionally, you know. It's not his thing, and just getting comfy with the fact that, like, okay, that's fine. That need is not going to be met in this relationship, but just because he holds the title of spouse doesn't mean that he's failing. It doesn't mean that he's not doing the what he's supposed to do. Like, I don't believe in that. I don't prescribe to that being like, there's no such thing.
Going to be all things,
right? Like,
even in your platonic relationships, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah,
same shit. 100%. Your BFF does not have to be everything either, right?
Yeah, or your parents aren't going to show up a certain way, you know, your father-in-law, you know, like, everybody is going to show up differently, and that's okay. But I think tackling that urgency and understanding that we can pause and actually start communicating to build intimacy is great. And that's what polyamory has taught me. It's taught me that I don't need to try to figure out how to show up. Like, I can actually just ask. I can actually check in just more often, because things change, right? Like, how I want to be treated is not going to be the same every month. Shoot, it's not the same every hour. So like, you know, having this practice of checking in with each other and being like, oh, okay, what is missing? How are you feeling? Are you feeling good with our communication? Are you feeling good with how we show affection? Are you feeling good with the support? Like, it's a lot of work. All of it's a lot of work, But once you start practicing, like you kind of get it down. And at this point, I've been polyamorous for 9 years. So it's like, to me, it's like a breeze. I'm just like, all right, this is how I normally show up in all relationships, because it's not just, I don't apply polyamory just to my romantic or sexual relationships. I apply it to my platonic relationships as well. And it's just how I do relationships, how I show up. And it's interesting. I've really enjoyed it.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, sounds good to me.
And it's so important.
No,
so
go for
it. For that open communication, but also in the sense of, when we were talking about grief and whatever, it's knowing who you can trust in those stages where you need different things. And that honesty, if you don't have it, oh my gosh. I feel like that has to be the forefront of any relationship or friendship.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it sucks though, because when other people don't have that or can't see that, and their relationships are different, they can't really conceptualize the why it's different, but instead want to make you feel weird or say shit to you about it. That's the part that sucks for me, because it's just like, honey, you could be living like this too.
Right.
Join us.
You're missing out.
Yeah.
The dark side. Yeah.
What are you doing?
Me and my friends talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Dark side. And it's just because there's so much confusion in society, right? This isn't the norm.
Yeah.
Especially being in a married couple relationship. Like cisgendered relationships aren't the norm to a lot of people, but we're all fluid in so many different ways. Why can't you just accept that this is how we live?
Yeah, I don't get that action. And I'm not even poly, and we're not even like, it's like straight cis man, queer cis woman, like pretty standard on paper, but still there's shit that we do that's normal for us, and people are just like, wow, it's like that, that's so weird. But yeah, these are the same people that are like, oh, the old ball and chain, and oh, y'all can't tell my wife about this. And it's just like, you don't have to live like this.
By the way.
But again, but it's still that urgency shit though, if you think about it, because somebody was like, well, I'm 30, I need a husband, this one will do, oh, I'm supposed to have a BFF for brunch, so I'm gonna keep this friend even though she treats me like shit. Like it's just like things that you have to check off.
There's a lot of settling. Urgency creates that. We settle because there is always that internal sense of urgency. So we're like, okay, well, this is what has to happen, because otherwise, like, I don't know, I'm a failure. Otherwise, I'm going to be unhappy. Otherwise, I'm going to die alone. Like there's just so many fears that fester, because urgency is like, well, you better hurry.
Right.
Let's go.
And my life's got to look just like the movies.
Right. Or the way that my parents said that it needs to look, or the way that my friends, are living their life. We have to mirror each other. And it's like, no, you don't have to do any of that.
Right.
Follow your joy.
Do whatever you want. People just live some wild, miserable lives because they're afraid of being miserable. It's just like, do you not see what you're doing?
Yeah. There's always pushback on authentic joy and pleasure, because it's so rare, right? Like a lot of people don't see that, so they're just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? How could you? You're hurting me,
so you can't be doing it.
Yeah.
If I don't know how to do it, then you can't.
Okay.
Where
it's like, actually, no one said you couldn't do it. Maybe you're just a little fearful of trying, and that's okay. Let's name it, honey. Let's it's hard.
Yikes. But back to specifically the poly thing, I am curious to know, it's with your relationships and you show up as yourself and all that good stuff, how does that conversation go with people that are not interested in that? Like, do you get pushback from family or I don't know, anybody, older folks or anything like that?
I don't know how my family feels about it, because they have no idea. I've never like outwardly said I'm polyamorous.
But that's another thing in the movies. You have to have an outing moment, right?
Yeah. I never came out as like queer.
Yeah.
I never came out as like anything. Like, you know, those, it's just not relevant in my family, at least. Like every family dynamic is different. And, you know, I would hope that we try to foster like loving, caring, direct communication type of relationships, but that's just not the one that I have with my blood family. My chosen family, of course, is very different, but the only family member that really knows about me and like my relationship style is my niece, who's 19. And she's so wonderful. Shout out Cassidy. She's so great, because when I was going through a breakup in 2020, right around the time that I put my dog down. Yeah. And then I had 2 friendship breakups the same week of that romantic breakup. Yeah. Some wild ass shit.
Yeah.
But anyways, during that romantic breakup, that's when I, you know, told my niece that I was polyamorous. And of course, at this time I'm married, and I still am, you know, and she was so chill about it. You know, she's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And it was great, you know. And she was so sweet, and she helped me through my feelings, and you know, this was, I love her. But more often than not, I don't really talk to folks who aren't, you know, either non-monogamous or who aren't open to these types of like relationship styles. I've definitely have talked to older folks like the boomers about it. I believe my father-in-law knows I'm polyamorous, but he hasn't really brought it up or anything. But I get a lot of questions about jealousy. I get a lot of questions about, you know, why, like, are your needs not being met? It's like weird stuff like that, where I'm like, what do you want to know?
Yeah.
Like, what are you really trying to say? Yeah, there's a lot of like curiosity around that. Like, what is the point? What's the purpose? Why do you do it? Like, there's a lot of curiosity. Nothing has ever really been disrespectful. It's just like, you know, just very outward questions of, yeah.
But I mean, that goes back to the boundaries earlier, right? Like, you've probably already, all right, this person is not for that conversation. So you already set yourself up for success there.
Yeah.
But if somebody did not have those boundaries, and it's like, everyone has to be everything, and I have to have a coming out story with my blood family, then that's going to be, even though it's going to be full of despair and horror. Yeah, no.
Labor.
Yeah,
it's
why
a
do
lot
it?
of labor.
Yeah. Why do it?
Yeah. It's the same thing for folks that have to explain their disability to able-bodied folks all of the time. And if you don't want to do it at work because it's going to exhaust you and add to that pain, you don't need to do it.
Yeah.
That's fine. Or you can do it when you feel like they're deserving of that, you know. It is a lifelong process, just like coming out as queer. Not everybody needs to know, but you can, you know, once you've built that trust with me, then we can talk about my relationships.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
we can talk about my
yeah.
So
not everyone is worth your time and your energy.
Yeah.
And that's like a very vulnerable, beautiful piece of you, you know, and not everyone is worth that. And we have to be able to like practice discernment with, is this a safer space, safer relationship for me to talk about these things, you know, to be my full self, or not.
Right. Well, I think that's kind of the either or thing that people are stuck with, is like, if I am disabled, then everyone needs to know, you know, especially for folks with traumatic things like spinal cord injuries, like, oh, if I'm in a wheelchair, I have to tell everybody the story of my accident, or you know, if I'm poly, then, you know, I'm proud to be queer and poly, I gotta tell everybody. But it's like, that's not really what being yourself means. Being yourself means you could talk about yourself or not, right? You're still yourself.
Yeah, honoring your desires to be vulnerable and to be open and to share what you want to share when you want to share it.
Yeah,
you know, that's important.
That makes a lot of sense to me, for sure. I think a lot of people probably need to hear some of those things.
Yeah. And what works,
Yeah.
the same thing is like what works for me doesn't have to work for you.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to go back to that topic of jealousy, because that's going to be the biggest thing. I mean, that's always the biggest thing. That's always the first question, especially you're in a happy married relationship, right? I forget the word. It starts with a P, but it's
is it a P or a C word?
Oh, C?
Compersion?
There you go.
I don't know this because it was in the episode of You.
Oh my God, that show.
It's the only reason I know the word.
Yeah, yes.
It's the idea that you get love from seeing that your love receives love from somebody else, and that's okay. And they don't have to feel the same way. Your friends or your father and mother-in-laws don't have to feel the same way.
Yeah.
Right?
Compersion. Yeah, that's a fun word, isn't it? I think if you experience compersion, a lot of times people think it negates jealousy, where it's like that's not the case at all. I experience feelings of jealousy often, like people, because it's been a while, and that is always the question of like, do you feel jealousy? And I'm just like, I am human. Yes. I am going to feel jealous. But because I also talk a lot about feeling happy to see my partners, engaging in other loving relationships. I think it's really hard to get comfortable with the fact that you can just be a full human in polyamory. There's a lot of perfectionism, especially now that it's become like a lot more mainstream, it seems like.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that's not the polyamory that I practice.
Dude, especially when you see it in those movies and those series, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, like you.
Just a sprinkle of BDSM in there. We enjoy that.
Yeah, it's like not every polyamorous person is like having sex parties or like contracts for group sex. Like that's not a thing, always. It can be, but it definitely looks different for every relationship, and every individual. So
yeah. For sure.
I will say though, I forgot her name, but that actress is like my favorite right now. The one that was the momfluencer.
Oh, Sherry, I think her name was.
Yeah. I just finished watching Search Party. She's in that too. She's the best.
And what was the name of the show again?
You?
Okay.
Yeah.
It was because it was the most recent season.
Yeah.
Yes.
You didn't watch it.
No, I did.
Oh,
I forgot the name.
Oh, yeah. They talked about it. Yeah, well, no, when you see Poly on TV, it's just like swinger sex party.
Yeah, or thruples.
Unless you see that. They used to have an MTV show, and I forgot what it was called, but it was like, I am this, and it's like some random thing, like I am afraid of cotton balls, and they followed someone who was afraid of cotton balls for an hour, and they had one that was on Poly.
Oh, okay.
Forever ago.
It was that weird. That
long, that's what I'm saying. It's like a weird show. Like I am afraid
Compare
of
it to loving.
Like
I am polyamorous.
Yeah. It was like
it's like afraid
in line with that.
Polyamorous. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely is not on that level. I don't think anymore. I think now it's like it's everyone wants to try it, everyone wants to do it, everyone wants to claim it, which is fine. Like feel free to dive right in and see what works best for you. Right. But I think once again we'll go back to that urgency piece. In my experience, a lot of folks who are new to polyamory they really just want to get to it, right? They want to get to that compersion. They don't want to feel jealousy. They want that contracted sex party, where it's like, hey, have you taken a moment to like really think about like how this is going to nourish you? Like, what is your intention behind wanting to have multiple intimate, loving relationships, whether that's romantic, sexual, or platonic? Like, what's really going on here? Like what's the driving force of your connection building? you know?
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
There's a lot
Yeah.
of questions that need to be answered before you take your pants off. That's for sure. I don't think you're helping anything.
I mean, for me, for sure. But once again, like that's how I choose to practice, right? Like I choose to be a little bit more intentional with who I engage with and how. And other folks just, you know, I think for me, it's important to be intentional because I've also been on the other side of just being like, sure, let's go for it. And it doesn't turn out really well. It kind of becomes there's a lot of hurt and a lot of harm that can happen because we're talking about a whole other person with a heart, you know, like with a, you know, their own individual processing and feeling this relationship in their own way. And it's like when we start to do things from ego, that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of times people use polyamory as an excuse to, you know, really feed their ego. And it's like, I don't vibe with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with it. I mean, all the same questions you should ask before doing that kind of stuff is, in an ideal world, all the same question you asked before you pick the first person, right? But nobody does that.
Yeah, because what you said was important. Everybody has a heart, and it can get dangerous when you add this label to someone who's not equipped for it. Say someone who has issues with commitment to begin with, someone who has issues with honesty, someone who cheated on their wives or multiple partners for a very long time, and they just slap a label. And it's like, wait, no, that is not the center of how, I mean, at least how, you know, like you said, how you work, how my relationships are, is like, no, we need to center honesty in this, because you're you know, that you're never going to change. I think what they said was, you do not need polyamory, you need a therapist.
Everyone needs a therapist, but that person is
Everyone needs a therapist.
Yeah.
But let's get down to the core of why you need to feed into your ego, like you said.
No, it's true.
Or release in that toxic way where you're hurting 10 other people.
It's very true. I know a lot of sad stories of the person hurt on the other end of, you know, people that say they're in open relationships, quote unquote, and then they're actually married, and, you know, they're hiding the other person. What kind of is that? What's open?
Yeah,
told me I was the girlfriend, and then I wasn't. It wasn't open for me. Like, yeah, I know people that have been that hurt person.
I've been that person where someone told me that they are practicing like open relationship or whatever, and it's like, just kidding.
Yeah,
their partner didn't know.
Yeah,
or I'm just like
yeah, we don't, there's a reason we don't take pictures together or post them or tag our locations. It's like,
what the heck? Yeah, I mean, it has to be consensual. Like, people have to be aware in order to really like practice it and to label it. And that's always my fear of people just being like, okay, I'm polyamorous now, or I'm non-monogamous now, or whatever. I'm just like, does everyone know? Does everyone know of this change?
Everyone in this party.
Yeah.
Because if not, then that's not what it is. That's cheating.
You're just using some words, and it's really a power dynamic.
Like, but how do people forget that consensual word before non-monogamy? Like, that blows my mind.
Yeah, I think it's for me, it really just does go back to ego and like wanting to feed all your desires, and just coming from a place of like, you're already not used to caring. That's not your practice. That's not your daily practice of caring for.
Your love language is no love.
Right? Love for you. And you want, and you want to feed all those desires, but in terms of others, like there's no care. That's practice.
That's rough.
It's easy to hide behind labels and ideologies, you know, instead of holding yourself accountable and being like, I'm actually not the greatest person. You know, I could do better.
That is so hard for a lot of people to see.
Yeah,
It's a
definitely.
hard pill to swallow.
It is.
It is.
But I think just going back to understanding that you're a human, right?
Yeah.
It's like none of us is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't strive for that either. Like, we're all always evolving and shifting, and cycles, you know, life is cycles, and it's okay to make mistakes. What's not okay is to not like recognize them and do better.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I'm with you.
Mm.
Wow. Well, considering all of the loss and just scandal and whatever afoot you told us of your past couple years, are you in a better season?
Thank you for asking. No, I'm great. I feel, I think, not to say that like you have to experience all these like horrendous things to come out better on the other side, right? Because that's not always true. But in my reality, it is true. Like I'm happy that I shed. I like to see it as a shedding. It was another cycle of life. It was a death that needed to happen. Many deaths, internal deaths that needed to happen in order for me to like really begin to embrace and rebirth myself. I'm a lot happier. I'm very happy. So thank you for asking.
Nice.
Thanks for sharing everything.
Yeah,
that
I'm
you
happy
have.
to hear it.
Yeah, thank y'all for sharing and giggling with me.
No, this is a lovely conversation to have, and definitely lots of things that people should be having more conversations about. But if anyone wants to look up this kind of stuff, are you online doing things? What's your thing?
Yeah, I am online. I'm on Instagram, you know. My handle is at princesa_cata, and I can spell that out. PRINCESA _KATA. And then I have a website that people can look at if they want to get to know just like more about like the things that I offer. And that's just catlopez.com. Simple, easy.
And how can we find your podcast?
Yeah, what was that?
Oh, yeah, my podcast. It's on Spotify and it's called Babes with Boundaries.
Oh.
And I co-host with a friend of mine. We're both queer, polyamorous femmes, and yeah, we are both very pro sex, kink, and yeah, we talk about some juicy stuff. So check it out.
All right. Love to hear it. Okay, Disabled Girls out. Oh, my mouse died. There it is.